Hey guys, Cody here with Mercury Rising Astrology. It's that time of the week again where we get to go over the astrology for the week ahead. So bear with me because at the time of day that I'm filming this, the light is going to shift quite drastically. Homeboy's on a budget, so bear with me until I can get a better setup and the light isn't such a big issue. But who cares what it looks like? What matters is the information, right? So this week we've got quite a big week. We've got some big transits happening. We've got a new moon in the sign of Aries, kicking off the fiery Aries season after the spring equinox. We've got Mercury CAZIMI, the sun. He's still retrograde, but this will be a moment of clarity, a moment of hopefully a breakthrough during the retrograde process. We've got both Mercury retrograde and Venus retrograde moving from Aries backward into Pisces, which is a definite vibe shift. Mercury is peregrine in Aries, but then becomes in detriment and fall in Pisces. And the opposite is true for Venus, where she's in detriment in Aries and exalted in Pisces. So it's quite a vibe shift there. And then one of the biggest transits of the year is happening at the end of the week on Sunday. We've got Neptune moving into Aries, kicking off a decade-long cycle at least. I think it'll be in there until 2039. This week is all about blending, a reflective release with kind of a fiery new beginning or a fiery new start. So there's going to be some tension or some paradox there. That Saturn sextile Uranus may get overshadowed a little bit by the other kind of punchier transits that are happening, but it's still going to be there underpinning kind of the rest of the week. So yeah, let's go into the day by day and see what we've got in store. On Monday, March 24th, we've got kind of a busy day for the moon. We've got the moon in Capricorn, where she will sextile Neptune before she moves into Aquarius. She'll then sextile Venus retrograde, conjoin Pluto, then sextile Mercury retrograde, and sextile the sun. So the moon will start off the day in Capricorn, move to Aquarius, where she has a harmonious sextile to all the happenings and all the dancing going on in Aries. So with the moon in Capricorn, it's Saturn's realm of duty and responsibility and effort. And that sextile to Neptune brings this opportunity in the morning to have like an intuition or a creative insight or some kind of subtle, intuitive lift to the morning. And I see this as kind of like a grounded, practical approach that's inspired by a dreamy ideal or some kind of hope or optimism for the day. I kind of like it for starting off the day on Monday. It's a quick one. You probably may not even know. You might still be asleep depending on where you are when that one happens. So you might wake up feeling kind of that way in general. Then the moon will move into Aquarius, where it moves from earthy Capricorn to airy, Aquarius. And this shifts the focus from that grounded practicality into the realm of ideas and connections and thoughts and community and teamwork and groups and systems. So when it moves into Aquarius, it'll immediately sextile Venus retrograde. And Venus has been going through this process of revisiting or reevaluating, themes of love, relationships, resources, those types of, Venusian themes are in a state of review. And with the moon's harmonious sextile from Aquarius, there's this kind of detached, objective kind of, perspective that the moon is taking on that Venus retrograde process. So I can see that being very helpful, kind of briefly understanding some of those Venusian themes, like stepping away from the fog of the retrograde cycle with Venus and using that Aquarian lens to objectively and coolly and detach a little bit from the emotions and look at your past relationships, look at your past desires and, how you've managed your resources and your values and your self-worth and kind of take an honest look at them. Then she conjoins Pluto, which brings some intensity. The attention here is on power, transformation, things that are hidden or beneath the surface that are bubbling up. And this is in terms of ideals or mental frameworks or some kind of group system. So I'd be mindful of that middle of the day. Then the moon will sextile Mercury retrograde, which is CAZIMI, the sun, around roughly the same time. And this offers, again, an objective kind of intellectual look at the Mercury retrograde process, our words, how we communicate, how we process ideas, how we, convey those ideas to other people and the kind of plans and stuff that we have. So with Mercury being CAZIMI, this could be kind of fused with our identity or our purpose or a sense of vitality. So there's an objective kind of harmonious look at that kind of process, especially with, I'll talk about in a second, Mercury CAZIMI. There's this purification process and the sextile to the moon in Aquarius allows that purification process to undergo in a way that is kind of observant and logical and kind of detached from any kind of outcome from that. The bigger transit for today, while the moon is doing her thing all over the place, we've got Mercury retrograde will be CAZIMI the sun. This is kind of the halfway period in the Mercury retrograde cycle. So, when Mercury is CAZIMI the sun, it's at the same degree as the sun, and they called it CAZIMI, and it meant something along the lines of in the heart of the sun. And it's like if the sun is the king, it's like sitting at the throne with the king. So it gets the recognition, it gets the glory, it gets the purification of being next to, the king. This may bring some sharp ideas or some insights or some clarity, some kind of aha moments around any of the things that you're reviewing in terms of the Mercury retrograde process on a general level. This can be how you communicate your words, how you think, how you manage your money and your resources and what you're spending things on, Mercury themed things. And I would also look at the houses in your chart that Mercury rules, because those themes are also going through that revisionary process. And so when Mercury is CAZIMI, there might be this opportunity to understand the process a little bit more. That clarity won't linger too long, because once it moves out from the heart of the sun, it's going to be combust again. And so there's going to be this kind of working through the fog a little bit. But and Mercury's still retrograde, so these things that come up might need to be workshopped or revised a little bit as we move forward. But still, there's this moment of like, oh, this piece of the puzzle goes here, and it gives you a broader picture of like what the process is. The puzzle's not over yet. Mercury's still retrograde. There's still some things to figure out and to navigate, and there might be some snags. But ultimately, it's this moment of like, oh, this makes a little bit more sense. Ultimately, with the moon starting off in Capricorn, it's time to focus, get shit done in the morning. That sextile to Neptune adds a kind of a creative inspiration to the mix. Then it shifts focused from, a pragmatic way of getting things done to like ideas and brainstorming and a people-focused kind of energy with the moon in Aquarius. Then it'll conjoin Pluto, where it brings a depth and intensity in that process. And with Mercury CAZIMI, there might be a moment of clarity and, a moment of insight. But because it's in Aries, words might be a little bit more blunt or a little bit more sharp. And because it's retrograde, it might stumble a little bit. So, and with Pluto, that can bring some unsettled vibes too. So be mindful of your words and your process, and maybe review things a little bit more than you would normally. But I think overall for today, it's, it's a busy day, but it's not too intense. I think we've definitely got some more intense transits later in the week. Tuesday is a bit of a slower day too. We have the moon still hanging out in Aquarius. She will trine Jupiter in Gemini midday to afternoon. And we've also got Mercury retrograding sextile Pluto. So those are kind of the biggest transits that we have for the day. With the moon still an airy, idea-driven, cool, progressive Aquarius, the trine to Jupiter is this harmonious, flowing trine. And it's this nice melding of energy between the moon's cool vision in Aquarius and Jupiter's big ideas and expansive nature. Jupiter in Gemini is, it struggles a little bit. It's in detriment, so it can be scattered and kind of follow all these tangents. But the trine to the moon in Aquarius kind of softens that out a little bit and brings kind of intellectually, an intellectually aware structure or framework to all of the scatteredness that Jupiter is maybe experiencing in Gemini. So I really love that. It's an upbeat, social, brainstormy type of energy, but with this cool kind of aloof, detached, logical perspective that the moon has in Aquarius. I think it can really use all that information that Jupiter and Gemini is pumping out through that harmonious trine in a way that really sparks off new ideas and really lends itself to creative collaboration. Conversations may spark, ideas will gain momentum today, and maybe they'll flow a little bit more freely. Mercury retrograde today will sextile Pluto. It's a brief transit, but, with Mercury in Aries, there's bold thoughts, and those are turned inward during the retrograde process, and Pluto brings this depth or intensity or a supportive kind of probing focus to that process, especially with the trine. It'll be subtle, but there's still an opportunity there to be able to like rethink your strategy, uncover some hidden truths during the retrograde process, look at ulterior motives you might have or other people might have, and find strength perhaps in old ideas, or find the power or the kernels of, truth in the darkness of old thought patterns and old ideas. especially coming off, the clarity of the CAZIMI and Mercury. This is kind of a time, it's still combust, but there might be a moment of power, a moment of intensity in that process. I would look out today for Jupiter being able to scatter things a little too much, and Mercury retrograde could snag on some of the details, so keep in mind out for that. But lean into that trine again and really use a cold, cool, detached, objective kind of logic to filter through all the information that's coming in and see how you can best use it. Wednesday also is kind of another quiet day, relatively speaking. We've got the moon still hanging out in Aquarius in the morning. She will make a square to Uranus in Taurus, bringing up some maybe disruptions or some tensions or some unexpected, kind of problems that you might have to face. And then she'll move into Pisces, so she'll switch from air to water. So the moon's still in Aquarius, squaring Uranus in Taurus. This is going to bring a tension between, an idealistic vision with Aquarius and some earthly kind of mundane disruptions with Uranus in Taurus. There could be a tug of war between change and stability. Something maybe comes up and kind of throws you off and you have to adapt in some way. I put down, an urge to change your morning routine might, come out of nowhere. And this might just mean, you go to a different coffee shop because you go to yours and you realize that they're under construction or the power's out or their system's not working or their machine is down or something like that. It's like an unexpected disruption that kind of throws a wrench into your morning. So be mindful of any kind of small delays that might rear their head this morning. Then the moon will move into Pisces, where it goes from the airy kind of cool vibes of Aquarius into the more watery, sensitive vibes of Pisces. So the mood will soften, it'll ease a little bit, any friction that came up during the disruptions that you had in the morning. This is a time to let go, surrender, kind of go with the flow of things. Ideal to unwind. It's, this is hitting later in the day, so maybe you take a meditation class or go to a yoga class, something of that nature. Just unwind from the tension of the day with the moon in Pisces, not making any major aspects. Just kind of lean into that watery, sensitive, maybe journal, creative writing, those types of things. The Saturn sextile Uranus is subtly building here. It'll suddenly build throughout the week. This is kind of pitting, discipline with innovation, and there's a nudge towards practical progress kind of the entire week that's going to be underlying the whole week of transits. So this morning might start off a bit bumpy. Take your time. Impulses might clash with some kind of worldly constraint. Just go with the flow. Go with the hiccups. They might expose you to some new insights or some new opportunities. It's frustrating, sure, because of the square tension there between the moon and Uranus, but I think ultimately sometimes we need to be shaken out of our routines, and it kind of gives us a new perspective. Again, coming off the Mercury CAZIMI, we're going into a new moon in Aries. We have Mercury and Venus both retrograde, revisiting things. So any kind of shakeup that happens, use that as an opportunity to gain a different perspective, or a perspective that can kind of maybe funnel new insights into those processes that are happening simultaneously. When the moon moves into Pisces later in the day, this will smooth things out and it invites calm and creativity. So take a bubble bath, relax, unwind from the day and surrender just a little bit in the evening time. On Thursday, things pick up a little bit. We've got the moon in Pisces making a sextile to Jupiter in Gemini, and we've got Venus retrograde moving from her detriment in Aries to her exaltation in Pisces, where she immediately conjoins Neptune. I look at these, so before Neptune moves into Aries, he's going to conjoin Venus retrograde, he's going to conjoin Mercury retrograde, and also the moon before the new moon. And so there's really kind of he's being ushered into Aries in a weird way. We're getting a lot of Neptunian energy right before we move into the Aries ingress of Neptune. It's almost like Venus and Mercury are standing at the door of the house and they're leaving to go to work while Neptune's coming home. Home might be an interesting analogy since Aries is quite the energy for Neptune, but you get what I'm saying. So today, again, with the moon swimming through Pisces, there's no big aspects besides Jupiter and Gemini, and that will blend, the Piscean sensitivity with the Jupiter and Gemini's kind of chatty optimism. It's an easygoing day. Conversations may flow a little bit easily. Creative ideas might bubble up. It's soft. There's an inspiring current, even if there's a little bit of a scatteredness because of Jupiter and Gemini and Mercury retrograde. I think ultimately this is pretty solid for the day. Venus retrograde moving back into Pisces is definitely a vibe shift because she's going from detriment in Aries to exaltation in Pisces. She's still retrograde, so that adds kind of to this friction, but there's a softness to the day now. There's again some more creativity because she's moving from the fiery, bold, like sign of the warrior into something a little bit more sensitive and in tune with things. She's still inward and reflective rather than chasing, that kind of Aryan. She's retrograde, so she's going to be reflective anyway, but in Aries, it's like I'm boldly reflecting. I'm going after it. I'm reflecting with a purpose. Whereas her reflection in Pisces is going to be a lot more intuitive and a lot more emotional and a lot more sensitive to the energy and to the vibes, if you will. You might, during this time, be revisiting a past love or have, and Venus's conjunction with Neptune kind of amplifies that creative, watery, imaginative energy. There's this ethereal fusion of romance and dreams, desires and illusions. So, with Venus retrograde, you're revisiting past love, past desires, past resources, how you show up in terms of self-worth. But when we're conjoining Neptune, there could be this, looking back at those things with rose-colored glasses or with this idealism that things were this grand utopia and awesome and great. Or there might be this sense of nostalgia or just generally creative visions. They might be a little bit more vivid than normal. Overall, it's a slow, kind of dreamy day. It's uplifting. The tone is kind of quiet. There might be some chats or some creative exchange, but it's not really loud and boisterous as much. There's still an inward lens to the Venus retrograde process, and Mercury is a retrograde as well again. So there's still this inner kind of undercurrent of things working out, and how that manifests externally will be interesting. I would watch out mostly today for the fog of, Venus conjoined Neptune, and be careful to look at everything with rose-colored glasses in the past or with the sense of nostalgia. Oftentimes, it's easy for us to forget the struggles or the hardships that we had in the past, and we look at times in the past, whether that's relationships or creative projects or, any kind of connections we have or anything along anything along those lines. Mercury retrograde hitting hard. There might be a tendency to look at those like they were better than they actually were. So just be mindful of that today. But overall, today seems like a pretty chill day. On Friday, we've got quite the day for the moon. She is getting around the block. We don't have a lot of other major aspects. We have some things in the works. Obviously, we've discussed those. But ultimately, the moon is getting around. So bear with me. We've got the moon in Pisces. She will trine Mars. She'll conjunct Saturn. She'll sextile Uranus, conjunct Mercury retrograde, conjunct Neptune, move into Aries, conjoin Mercury retrograde, and then by the end of the day, sextile Pluto. Wow. This is probably the busiest day of the week. We've got other transits happening, obviously kind of, quote, bigger transits happening, but the moon in ancient astrology was looked at as the flow of events and how the flow of events would unfold throughout the day or the week or the month or the year. And then all the other transits kind of happened, but the moon is what disseminated the energies down. With the moon making all these aspects today, it's going to be a busy day. And I mean, we've got a lot of opposites here. We've got Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Venus, Neptune, Mercury, Pluto. It might feel like whiplash. I feel like this is going to be a really busy day on Friday. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but it's a lot. So, first of all, the moon in Pisces will trine Mars in Cancer. This is a harmonious trine. This is where we're starting off the day, and I like it. It's in water signs. We might be a little bit, in our feels, a little bit more emotional than normal. However, there's a little bit of mutual reception there because the moon rules Mars in Cancer. So even though the Mars is in fall, this harmonious trine gives a Piscean resource to Mars to help him out a little bit. There might be this emotional drive with this blend of, gentle action in the process, a moment to push or protect from the heart. There's a flow between, our emotional dreams in Pisces and our drive to take action with the Mars in Cancer. There might be a tendency here or an opportunity here to fight for something or stand up for something that you believe in that's a higher cause, or defend something that is worth defending. Not necessarily in an overly conflictual way, but in a way that allows, that Mars in Cancer to protect or to take action on an emotional level. Then we have the moon conjoining Saturn, which is going to test that trine to Mars. It's going to be kind of a reality check. It's going to be grounding that emotional drive that we had with the trine to Mars with a responsibility or a duty or a delay or an obstacle of some sort. It's time to face reality during this moment, do the hard thing. You might hit delays or a limit that makes you want to stop, but just use that Mars and Cancer energy and like push forward. Make sure you're doing it from an emotional space and ask yourself what Saturn is trying to teach you. Luckily, that doesn't last for long. None of these transits do, because the moon then makes a sextile to Uranus, where any kind of obstacles, delays, or, obstructions that Saturn might have, tested you with, there's going to be a sudden jolt, an insight, a shakeup, something unexpected comes, kind of breaks that through, and you might have some kind of new insight or new opportunity in order to shift your focus a little bit and get past that Saturnian block. Right up on the heels of that, we've got the moon conjoining Venus retrograde and then Neptune almost immediately. And this will deepen those feelings. This will soften the mood. Again, there might be these feelings of nostalgia, revisiting past relationships or past kind of creative projects. Or you might kind of be feeling in this like Venusian kind of daze, this luxurious kind of daydream kind of vibe. Maybe you put in the hard work, you got emotionally connected, you hit a roadblock, you broke through, and now it's time to like just revel in the feeling of being out of it a little bit. Right after that, the moon will move into Aries, where she sheds the waterworks of Pisces. She's shedding that dreamy haze of the Venus-Neptune conjunction, and she's ready to get shit done. She enters the battlefield, the sign of the warrior, where she will conjunct Mercury retrograde. This sharpens emotions with bold thoughts, but Mercury's still retrograde, so there might be some miscommunications in those thoughts or some snags in the plans, or you might have to revise something of some sort. The heart and the mind here meet, but the mind is conflicted or revisiting things, so keep that in mind. There might be an impulsive kind of inclination to act on half thoughts or things that are half thought out, so be mindful of that as well. And then there's sextile to Pluto that the moon will make later in the day. Adds an intensity to the day, but that sextile is harmonious, so it gives us the strength to utilize and face those bold feelings or those ideas, even if they're half baked. Like, it'll give us an intensity or a courage underneath the surface to kind of tackle that stuff with. I would ultimately tie up loose ends today and get ready to set some bold intentions for the new moon. On Saturday, March 29th, we've got a new moon in the sign of Aries. That's our big transit for the day, along with Mercury moving into Pisces. But ultimately, we've got the new moon in Aries, and then she will sextile Jupiter in Gemini shortly after that. And like I just said, we'll have Mercury retrograde moving into Pisces, where it will conjoin Neptune. So again, Neptune's getting hit a lot right now, and I think it's starting to foreshadow a little bit between these Aries and Pisces kind of flip-flops and hitting Neptune. We're starting to get an idea of what, a subtle idea of what Neptune and Aries might start bringing us over this longer period. But for today, expect a surge of drive or an urge for independence or to get things done, and a tendency towards bold moves. We're starting a new cycle with the new moon in Aries, and so, we need to set our intentions around Aryan things. Where do we need to have more courage? Where do we need to speak up? Where do we need to take bold action? Where do we need to address our fears and look at things with a warrior mindset? How can we stand up for ourselves? How can we separate ourselves from the pack and make a difference in a way that's positive, but it honors who we really are? Those are some of the themes that I would look at with the new moon in Aries. I'd also look at what house it rules in your chart, because that house, I would set intentions in terms of that house. Then with the sextile to Jupiter after the new moon, this adds a burst of confidence, a burst of information, ideas, insights being in Gemini, maybe even social connections, something, maybe you go to a party, it's Saturday night, maybe you have, a lively conversation that helps you get clear on those intentions, or maybe you have social anxiety, and this is a time with the new moon in Aries to set intentions to confront that fear and be social, and you'll be rewarded with that, with the sextile to Jupiter. So it feels like a call to action here with a need to plant the seeds to charge forward with a big picture kind of idea and plan. Also today we've got Mercury retrograde moving into Pisces, where it conjoins Neptune. This is going to be Mercury's moving from the battlefield into the watery ocean of Pisces, so it's going to be hazy, and the conjunction of Neptune is going to add this nebulous kind of mystical mist to everything. Mercury's kind of lost in the sauce here. He's, retrograde. He's in detriment. He's in fall. He's conjoined to Neptune. That's a lot of scattered, confusing, watery energy for Mercury and what he likes to be in. So expect, blurry, dreamy, hazy, out of it kind of clashing with that Aryan energy of the new moon. Like, there's a part of us that wants to move forward and set these bold intentions, but there's also this part of us in Mercury retrograde conjoined Neptune that has a hard time figuring out what the plan is, and maybe lost kind of in the spiritual realm of things or in the emotional, imaginative realm of things. And you have Venus also retrograde. So there's this tension this week between bold starts and revising and being too out of it. I would keep that in mind. It's how do we balance that is really the key for this week. Introspection with Mercury and Pisces retrograde is going to be an overdrive. It's not good for clarity or precision, but it's great for creativity and imagination. So if you have something to do that's creative or imaginative, do that. If you have something that requires focus and precision and clarity, I would maybe avoid that on Saturday. Ultimately today, the Neptune moving into Aries ingress tomorrow is looming kind of large, and Neptune is getting kind of these hits before he makes the transfer. We've got that new moon in Aries that is asking us for a bold start, but we're still reworking some things. So if you're feeling an inner kind of tug of war, that's normal. It's okay. Not everything needs to be cut and dry. Just move forward with what makes sense to you right now. And as the Mercury retrograde process and the Venus retrograde process and the new moon unfolds, and we get used to the vibes of, Neptune and Aries, it'll become a little bit clearer on what you need to do. So just stick with it, be mindful. We're starting to get a sense of what's to come today on Saturday. On Sunday, March 30th, we've got all the stuff the moon is going to do. It's not that much. We've got a moon in Aries starting off the day with a square to Mars in the morning. Then she moves into Taurus, where she's exalted, and she squares Pluto in the evening. So lots of squares to the moon today between Mars and Pluto, kind of prickly. However, she's in her comfort zone, and she's exalted, and she's a little bit more comfortable than she was in Aries. So that's not too bad. Ultimately today, we've got Neptune's ingress into Aries. That's kind of the big transit. With the moon starting off in Aries, we've got, that fiery, bold, we're fresh off the new moon energy, we're ready to tackle our stuff. And then she hits the square to Mars, where, there's this tense but dynamic kind of aspect. It's tense because there's a square, but it's kind of dynamic and maybe not as bad because, Aries is ruled by Mars and Cancer is ruled by the moon. So they're in each other's house. They've swapped places. So even though they're not very happy, either of them, and they're kind of clashing, there's this opportunity there to make the best out of the clash, and they're kind of working off each other in an interesting way. There might be a need to channel that Mars and Cancer emotional protection with an emotional grit with, the moon in Aries. There might be some kind of conflict. You might have a fight for something. You might, tempers might flare up. You might have some conflicts at home or with family members. But ultimately, I think that, it stays workable because even though there's a tension there between them in the square aspect, because they're in mutual reception, they can kind of understand each other a little bit. And so things may not get off on the right foot, or there might be some, clashes. But I think ultimately if we, stay on our shit, it can be worked through pretty well. Then the moon will move into Taurus, where she's exalted. It's time to revel in the lush garden of Taurus. If you had any kind of family tension or relational tension because the moon was square Mars, this is the time to just kind of relax a little bit, take care of yourself, get that manicure, pedicure, go get that smoothie, treat yourself to some ice cream, whatever your thing is. take a yoga class, meditate, whatever you do to treat yourself a little bit. When the moon's in Taurus, that's a great opportunity to do that, and it'll soothe some of the, moon in Aries heat and a lot of those other Aries placements in that square to Mars. And you'll need it because then she squares Pluto. So take that moment of self-care whenever you can get it on Sunday, because Pluto's going to disrupt this kind of stability that we thought we had with the moon in Taurus. Just when you thought you were relaxing and enjoying yourself, there might be an intense moment, something from the subconscious comes up, some kind of power play or darkness kind of intrudes. I think of like, I hate to bring it up, but I've been pretty obsessed with the new Gaga album, and Garden of Eden is a really interesting song because it has this ideal kind of, place of being in that garden, but then there's this rotten like apple. And so that's kind of what I see here. It's like the moon in Taurus is in this Garden of Eden. It's lush, it's awesome, but then Pluto comes in with like this darkness that needs to be confronted. So be mindful of that. There might be this sense of subtle anxiety beneath the surface. Kind of explore it a little bit. Use the moon's comfort in Taurus. Use that self-care routine to kind of ground yourself in a place where you can face those darker, shadowy, kind of unconscious place, so that you can bring it up in a way that's comfortable. And comfortable may be a strong word, but in a way that's like safe, I guess, so that you can understand how it's working and why it's there and maybe why it came up. Ultimately, today is mostly, in my opinion, about Neptune's ingress into Aries. This is a jarring shift from Pisces. This is, ushering a whole new era. It's going to be in Aries until about 2039, if I remember correctly. Think of Neptune as imaginations and dreams, and Aries as the sign of bold action. This is going to be inspired pioneers or delusional warriors. Neptune dissolves boundaries. It's tied to transcendence or even delusion. And in Aries, it's the sign of the warrior, and it's assertive and it's primal. So this could be inspired crusades or artistic boldness, collective ideals turned into personal quests. That's on the positive side, but there can be risks of confusion and fighting for false causes or ideological fanaticism and not being able to see other people's ideas and other people's sides. Neptune was in Pisces since 2011, and it'll be in Aries until 2039. I'm glad I got that number right. I wrote it down now, but I didn't write it down earlier. Glad I remembered. So this is a big era-defining shift, and I did another video on Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus and moving signs and what that all means. Go check that out if you want a sense of what we're getting into over the next several decades with these big transits. I plan on doing a Neptune and Aries video just on its own, so look out for that because it's quite the shift as well. Ultimately today, be mindful, meet any conflict or tension with an emotional honesty. Don't get caught up in ideological fanaticism. Make sure what you're fighting for is rooted in a true sense of what is honest and real, and not some, fantasy that you're fighting for on behalf of someone else. Or maybe, you're being fed all this information with Jupiter and Gemini, and you're holding on to ideas that aren't yours, and you're doing other people's fights, and you don't really even believe the ideas. Very Neptune and Aries, very Jupiter and Gemini, very Uranus and Gemini when it comes. So be mindful of that. Go check out that other video. Lots of good stuff in there. Be mindful of deception as well, or any kind of blurriness today. Balance inspiration and illusions, and harness that friction for action, and ground all of that into the moon in Taurus. All of this fiery energy that's happening, try to take care of yourself today on Sunday. End the week right. Factor in some self-care, reflect a little bit, and start the week off strong starting on Monday. Wow, what a week. I just looked at myself and I realized how much the light has changed. I told you that was going to happen. I appreciate you understanding. I'm going to have to figure out some kind of situation. I'm moving soon, and so I'll do it when I get to the new place. But as for now, this is what we got. So ultimately this week, we've got, the Mercury CAZIMI on Monday, bringing some clarity. We've got Venus retrograde moving into Pisces, conjoining Neptune, hazy, dreamy, soulful, kind of a review of our relationships and our desires in that sense. We have a new moon reset in Aries that's foreshadowing this Neptune and Aries era. We've got Mercury moving back into Pisces, adding to some confusion, but also adding some imagination and creativity. And to top it all off, we got what we just discussed. We've got Neptune moving into Aries. So, this is a week where reflection and emotional sensitivity in that process clashes with like wanting to move forward in a way that's bold and fiery and new. Retrogrades are looking back, but Aries wants to, push forward. There's going to be clarity versus confusions, and challenges meet opportunities. Just balance that tension as best as you can. Things are shifty, things are going to get weird, and, at least they're moving. I don't know about you, but I've said it before, I'll say it again. I've felt stuck for a while, and I'm looking for fresh new energy, and even if it's chaotic, uncertain, delusional, like, I'm here for it. Whatever, like, bring it on. I'm here for it. In my mind, we all chose to be born right now, right here, and exist within this time frame. So there's a part of our soul that knew what we were getting into, and just be here for it. Love it, hate it, who cares? Just be here for it. Ultimately, that's what we got for the week. If you like this content, give this video a like. It really helps. Comment below on how some of these themes might be playing out for you. I'd love to hear from you guys. It helps me refine my skills and helps me, connect with you guys, and you guys can connect with each other. And if you love this astrological content, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot too. Until next time, guys, I'll talk to you later. Take care.